Hello and welcome to Cut to the Ball and the Post-Truth Apocalypse. I'm Ben, and as always I'm hanging out with Mike.
Hello.
And Claire.
Hey.
Today is our Christmas episode, and it's Dark Christmas because on this show we refuse, and I refuse, and that by default means that everyone else has to agree with me because, you know, why not?
Because what, you're the fucking dictator?
Yes,
That's
I am.
You want, isn't it?
This is a Ben-tatorship.
Yeah. Luckily I agree with you.
Yeah.
Not the dictatorship.
Oh right, I thought
on this particular point.
Mm-hmm. And I believe this is Claire's first Dark Christmas with us, and we've already shocked her into shock.
Yeah.
And my own state of shock by today's topic.
I screamed when we watched a little bit of a video about the topic today.
She did let out a little squeal.
Yeah.
Yeah, today's topic is Unit 731, the Japanese, let's say, research centre for biological weapons and medical purposes and weapons and anything else the really sadistic bastards in that camp really wanted to get there to do, to be fair.
Yeah.
And we're going to go through that a little bit, but first, let's thank some new and returning listeners. But I think, before we say anything else, I think this is our darkest ever Christmas episode. Quite easily. I mean, we did Jimmy Savile last time.
That's pretty dark.
That's pretty dark. This is darker.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
You've done the
side, isn't it?
You watched the movie. Listeners, okay, let's say thank you to Sid Cup in the United Kingdom, Bogra in Bangladesh, Buenos Aires in Argentina, Falklands, Pau in France. Lots of Americans there. El Paso in Texas, Houston, Texas, New York, Galeta, California, Philadelphia, PA, Shepshed in the United Kingdom, Manchester in the UK, San Cristobal in the Bolivian Republic of Venezuela, Cape Town in South Africa, London, United Kingdom, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Yeah. Niles, Michigan, let's go into the top 10. Groningen in the Netherlands, Telford, our hometown, Charlotte, North Carolina, Boardman, Oregon, and Madrid, Spain, Ashburn, Virginia, and top is Guadalajara, Spain. Thank you all for listening. You are going to be suitably horrified this week.
Yeah, thank you.
Before I delve too deeply into Unit 731, I want to start with quite a famous incident that happened in 1937.
Let's start at the beginning. When did Japan invade China?
1937.
I was just
about to say that.
I thought it was 35.
You are right, 35. Yeah. Sorry. Japan invaded China in 1935. It's the Second Indochina War, and the reason they did this mainly is because they wanted an empire. They caught up with the West, and they'd already smacked the shit out of the Russians in 1902.
They did.
Which was a bit of an upset for the books.
Yeah, because the Russians were like, right, we want to expand, and...
Why is everyone wanting to expand?
That was the age of empires, wasn't it?
Yeah, the age of colonialism.
Yeah. And they thought, oh, we'll take on the Japanese, they're an easy
target.
Yeah.
What they didn't know is that the Japanese had this wonderful... When they industrialised, they went from like a feudal society to an industrialised nation in like not even 100 years, pretty much. It was fucking ridiculous.
They were isolated for a long time, weren't they?
Absolutely. So what they did is like, okay, we've got to have a modern navy, so we're going to send people to Britain who's got the best navy, and they're going to learn in British academies, and they're going to learn at British shipwrights, and they're going to come back here and we're going to start building our own. And so they said, we need a really modern army. Who's got the best army? Germany has, right, send guys to Germany. They took a bit of everything from everywhere and brought it into this very Japanese belief structure, infrastructure, religious belief in some cases. The emperor was a god. It was a code. It was a pervasion of the old Bushido code, because prominent in all of this was this sense of nationalism.
Okay.
That the Japanese, we've got to talk about it in the context of the time. So I'm going to use a few phrases which are a bit out of date today. But they talked about the yellow man and the white man and the black man, and places in Shanghai which were Western owned. Remember, the Western colonies had all their colonies out there: the British, the Dutch, the Germans, Portuguese. We're all out there. You know, they were like, well, why should we be under the rule of these guys? We're a strong, independent nation. We were samurai. We've got this just as good a history as any of these other nations. But we were just, you know, we aren't there. So we need to get there as fast as possible. So we need an empire. And that's why they picked on China, which at the time was undergoing a massive civil war. The communists and the nationalists. So they basically took advantage of the chaos and went, right, we're going to carve ourselves a piece of China. Plus they're ancient enemies too. They've been fighting each other all from the age of samurai up to obviously this point here. And they're still a bit tense today, aren't they?
Like us and the French.
No, Mike, the Entente Cordiale. How could you forget about that?
Us and the French at a particular period of history, definitely. We was at war with them, weren't we?
You mean like we spanked their asses every time we fucking met them? Give Johnny Frog a damn good thrashing.
I guess Napoleon was the last time we were at war with them, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. We fought in the Crimea with them as allies in 1853 or something like that, yeah. So it was the first time the British and the French had gone to war in something like together in like 200, 500 years, something daft like that. Like the Middle Ages, then we started fighting each other. But yeah, they did not like it, so they came in a peculiar brand of nationalism, of course, within the Japanese culture, and it led them to believe that instead of incorporating all these so-called yellow races into one sort of super uber duper empire where everyone's equal, the Japanese started to think themselves more superior to the other races. Oh, they shouldn't be equals with us, we should be the masters. They've allowed themselves to be conquered. We never did that. Obviously we're superior. And instead of
old-fashioned racism, eh?
And the Germans made the same mistake. Instead of going into the USSR as liberators and welcoming people, oh, come on, yeah, you hate Stalin, join our side. They went in there and shot everybody. When really they could have got an extra, Christ knows how many 100,000 soldiers out of Ukraine alone, which has suffered horribly under Stalin. And the Japanese could have done the same thing, but they chose to portray themselves as being more superior. They basically didn't even see the Chinese as being human, and we're going to get to that later on in 731, but I think the basis of it is laid here. So during the Sino-Japanese War, Nanking, the capital of China, falls to Japanese forces, and the Chinese government flees to Hankow, further inland along the Yangtze River. To break the spirit of Chinese resistance, Japanese General Matsui Iwana ordered that the city of Nanking be destroyed. And much of the city was burned, and Japanese troops launched a campaign of atrocities against civilians in what became known as the Rape of Nanking, where they butchered an estimated 150,000 male war prisoners, massacred an additional 50,000 male civilians, and raped at least 20,000 women and girls of all ages, many of whom were mutilated or killed in the process.
Jeez.
Over the course of a few weeks.
Pretty horrific, isn't it?
It is. There was a well-published newspaper story about two Japanese officers having a contest, a bet on who could take the most heads with their swords. One guy won it with 106, while the other was close on 104.
Fucking hell. Psychopaths, man.
It was over a 2-week period. There's an unlikely saviour in this story. A lot of people, women, children, men, fled to the diplomatic district where several of the countries who were around, and most of the other Western countries were in there in one aspect or another, where the embassies were, and it was walled off from the rest of the city. It was enclosed, as most diplomatic offices are in some countries. They're enclosed in their own little separate district. And one country hung their nation's flag from the walls, and shouted as many as they could in the embassy, which is a fair few thousand. Anyone want to guess which nation that was?
Britain?
Nope. Germany.
Oh, right.
Who were allied with Japan at this point. The German ambassador hung a swastika flag from the walls of his embassy and basically said to the Japanese, no, this is German soil, we're allies, you can't come in, and I'm choosing to shout at these people.
That's a turn up for the books, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. I just wanted to touch on that because I think it's really important to understand the context of how they treated the Chinese. These were soldiers doing this. General is just letting his troops loose. Cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war. You get through the walls, you can do what you want.
Yeah, that's what it used to be in the old days, wasn't it?
It was.
That was it. That was the thing.
Rules of war.
Yeah.
Or the de facto rule of war was like, all right, we can lay siege to you. Sorry, I'm cutting you off a little.
Go on.
We can lay siege to you, but how about if you surrender now, we'll let you walk away. We want the city. We'll take enough food and as valuable as you can carry. Everything else you leave. You can go and fight another day, but we want this. Or you can fight us, and we'll kill you all. Everyone inside dies. You're all enemy combatants.
Yeah.
You're making us go through the effort of this siege, and the bloodshed that inevitably follows. You suffer that price.
But to encourage soldiers to sign up, that was it. You get the spoils of war. If you win, you get to loot and rape as much as you want.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
It was part of the sign-up deal. You can certainly take the spoils of war, and as time progressed, when we get to sort of the 1800s, you have like a military law come in. That's the rape thing stops. The spoils of war is always a bit frowned upon, but they're always allowed to get away with it. For God's sake, they still do it today. Everyone still takes trophies, not like ears and stuff like that, but like I'd imagine plenty of soldiers come back with some like Iraqi unit army flag or something, some souvenir they'd taken. Yeah. During the Falklands, some of the SAS nicked a statue of the Argentinian dictator.
I did that.
And in the mess at Hereford for years. It's interesting the regard they held them in, and so you see the spoils of war. Just go and do what you want. So let's move on to Unit 731. I think that was an important sort of prelude to the what we're going to talk about. So obviously World War II was beyond horrific for hundreds of millions of people. And it's almost as if the developed countries of the world had surplus rage and hate they've been stirring up. And in some cases that's true, especially in Nazi Germany. A little bit of resentment in the a lot of resentment in the Japanese case. And out of all the areas in which World War II was fought, none was active as long as what would be known as the Pacific Theatre. In fact, Japan arguably started the war by attacking Manchuria in 1931. We were both wrong there. And it inarguably waged war with China by invading in 1937. Manchuria's like it's part of China, but it wasn't part of China at the time. It's in China now.
Yeah. It was Chinese people that inhabited it.
Yes, pretty much, yeah. So the disturbances and upheavals that these invasions caused shook China to its very foundations and triggered a civil war and a famine that promptly killed more people that currently live in Canada and Australia combined.
Wow.
Yeah. And lasted until the country's Soviet, quote, liberation in 1945.
Well, you can understand, can't you, why they went communist if there's a famine that's killing that many people.
Of course.
It ain't working, is it?
No.
And the Japanese invasion doesn't help.
No.
And out of all these outrages that Imperial Japan unleashed upon the Chinese people during this brutal occupation, and there were some bad ones as we saw earlier, even by World War II standards, probably none was as gratuitously hateful as the operations of Unit 731, the Japanese biological warfare unit that somehow plumbed new depths in what was already a nearly genocidal war. Despite innocent beginnings as a research and public health agency...
That's how these things normally begin, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Well, we saw that in V for Vendetta. Immunity research, wasn't it? Oh yeah, we had that pathogen, it killed loads of people. You're undesirables, we're going to start testing this on you. All of a sudden, next thing you know, you're torturing people. Claire's just shaking her head in disbelief. I think they might have shocked her. Happy Christmas, Claire!
Yay.
Because I showed her some clips of Men Behind the Sun.
Oh yeah, Mike watched the film, Japanese film, isn't it? Men Behind the Sun.
A Hong Kong film.
Available.
It wouldn't be a Japanese film, would it?
I don't know.
Well,
they do really preach against this, no?
Yeah, but they're not going to make a film that graphic. They
That's true, they won't even show a dick. Will they?
Or a pussy.
Oh, it's all pixelated, they won't even show genitals, they're going to make that. Alright, Hong Kong film. Men Behind the Sun, and
1988.
I've seen bits of it and decided that I didn't really fancy sitting there and watching that while I immersed myself for a week listening to stuff like this. I was happy to listen to it, happy to watch documentaries, not to watch it happening. Mike volunteered because his worldview is bleak enough.
Yeah, it was bleak film. Very bleak. It's up there with Threads, to be fair.
I think it's bleaker than Threads.
I don't know, because you know it's coming to an end, but the Threads thing, I mean, come on, the ending to that.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. Okay.
I
So
think
no one
Fred is-
commissioned them in the first place to be like, torturers. It was, more for health reasons.
Yeah, research agency, yeah.
But you only need one sociopath in charge. Ironically, a lot of this work's been carried out by doctors. Now, what's the Hippocratic Oath?
Yeah.
First, do no harm. Unless, of course, you're doing harm to prevent harm to others, which, of course, how they justified it. We're causing these injuries so we can learn how to treat them better. They eventually grew into an assembly line for weaponised diseases that, if fully deployed, could have killed everyone on Earth several times over. All this progress was, of course, built on the limitless suffering of human prisoners who were held as test subjects and walking disease incubators until Unit 731 disbanded at the end of the war.
Yeah, they called them logs, didn't they?
They did, we'll get to that, yeah.
So where do they, they just grab these people all from anywhere?
Just civilians? You're
Yeah,
under
or
Japanese
prisoners.
occupation now? Or prisoners?
Western prisoners as well, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
Western prisoners
Wasn't
too.
just Chinese people.
No?
Mainly Chinese people, but...
Majority of them, but yeah, there was Russian prisoners, there was, I think, Australian prisoners, probably a few Americans. Don't think any British. Never heard of it, British. Let's start with the Frostbite Testing, which is the clip we watched on the thing that caused Claire to squeal.
Yeah.
Yoshima Hisoto, a physiologist assigned to Unit 731, took a special interest in hypothermia, and as part of Maruta's study in limb injuries, Hisoto routinely submerged prisoners' limbs in a tub of water filled with ice and had them held until the arm or leg had frozen solid and a coat of ice had formed over the skin. According to one eyewitness account, the limbs made a sound like a plank of wood when struck with a cane.
They were just whacking, weren't they, in this film? Just whacking the woman's arms,
Yeah.
chopping the ice off that had formed.
Yeah. Wasn't he seeing if she was numb as well? I think he was doing that. Because at first he just hit her once or twice and then he poured some more water over her. Then he come back a little while later, didn't he? And then when it was totally numb and frozen, they took her through to a bath of warm water.
15 degrees. Yes.
Dip the limbs in.
Yep, he tried different methods for rapid rewarming of the frozen appendage. Sometimes he did this by dousing the limb with hot water, and sometimes by holding it close to an open fire. Other times by leaving the subject untreated overnight to see how long it took for the person's own blood to thaw it out. Or they just, in the film, they degloved the woman. They put her hands in the, up to the sort of elbows, wasn't it, into this 15 degrees water. And then he made a couple of quick cuts, and before you know it, he just skeleton hands, and you don't want skeleton jazz hands, which is what she had temporarily.
Nah, she pulled her hands out the water, and her skin looked like it was sort of like dangling down a little bit, and then he sort of just pulled it, and that's when I screamed because he just like, ah! Her face as well. What would you do? Just seeing just your bone.
Freak the fuck out is what I do.
Horrific, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, great, I've got to have fucking Skeletor hands the rest of my fucking life. If I live that much longer, probably not. I'm going to have a heart attack from shock.
Wouldn't you start pissing out of, a heart attack, or pissing out of blood from where it's been ripped away?
Well, I guess it's because it was frozen.
Yeah, so it'd be, just be dead, wouldn't it? It's dead flesh, I guess.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, so this goes to vivisection of conscious prisoners. It started off out as a research unit investigating the effects of disease and the injury on the ability of the fighting ability of an armed force. Which makes sense. If you guys are wounded or they've got they've got an illness, you want them back in the field as quickly as possible, don't you?
Yeah.
That's why superglue was invented, wasn't it?
It was. I was in Vietnam.
To glue your wounds up.
Yeah, that's why superglue sticks nothing better than your hands.
Yeah, that's what it was designed to do. Yeah. You got a big hole in it, super glued up.
Stops the bleeding.
It's not
temporarily.
It's a temporary measure, but they might survive then by the time you get them back to the hospital.
Guts are out, stuff them back in, super glue you back up.
Bit of bandage, away you go.
That's it. Now, one element of the unit, called Maruta, took this research a little further than the usual bombs of medical ethics by observing injuries and the cause of disease on living patients.
A little further. That's a bit of an underestimate.
Just a bit. At first, these patients were volunteers from the ranks of the army, but as these experiments reached the limits of what could be non-invasively observed, and as the supply of volunteers dried up, because we're not at the stage of killing yourself for your country yet. We're not. Yeah, I volunteer for the live vivisection. No one's doing that. I volunteer to fly my plane full of bombs into a warship in a few years' time when the shit hits the fan, but I'm not doing that. I'll do anything for Japan, but I won't do that. That might be the only joke I get in this episode. There it was. Hope you enjoyed it, listener. As the concept of consent went out the window, so did the restraint of the researchers, and it was around this time that Union 731 began referring to confined research subjects, that's a nice way of saying it, as logs, or maruta in Japanese. And the study methods in these experiments were barbaric, and that's the inhumanity. You're not even referring to these guys as people at this point. They are logs to be cut open, cut apart, do whatever you want with. Claire's looking at me with a horrified face again.
Yeah, but logs are inanimate objects, it doesn't matter, does it? If you've got to dehumanise them.
I'm just imagining like one of these doctors going, like, get me the logs.
Get me log 36, please.
Yeah, find me a healthy female log.
Yeah.
But that's how you dehumanise it, isn't it?
You have to dehumanise it, yeah.
The Nazis did it in the concentration camps. First they used to have the Einsatzgruppen going around, just shooting people, and then loads of those guys started to kill themselves because even though they were fanatical Nazis, shooting people, unarmed people, over and over again, day in, day out, tends to take a psychological toll.
Yeah.
Unless you
really enjoy it.
Unless it's drilled into you, these aren't human beings, they're vermin, they're rats.
And that's what they tried to do, isn't it? They're subhumans, but even so, killing unarmed civilians over and over and over and over and over and over again is eventually going to cause you a massive psychotic break, unless you're a sociopath. And obviously there was a lot of sociopaths in those regiments, but you know what I'm saying?
Of course, they rise to the top, don't they?
That's very true. But so it does. So what did they do? They couldn't have people going shooting people anymore. They invented a gas chamber. That's an impersonal way of doing it then. It's a very similar thing. These are logs, they're not human. Don't worry about it. Don't even see them as human. Yeah, they walk and talk, but nah. We're the superior race and these people are here to do our bidding.
We're to be better off without them. That's basically what it is.
A lot of some radical Japanese thought it was like, well, what do we do with the Chinese when we've conquered them? Do we sterilise them? Do we kill them all? And it was very much like a thing. Like, what do we do? Do we going to sterilise them? We're going to kill them all because they'll come back at us. There'll always be more of them than there is us.
Yeah.
Plus they want the land to be able to inhabit their own race.
That's it. Then they start to breed, to spread after the war's over. You got your empire. What do? You settle down in prosperity. Or you keep attacking, so you need new meat for the grinder, so you've always got to start breeding more.
That's why Hitler invaded the East, didn't it? He wanted the land.
A lot of ethnic Germans in the eastern provinces, though, as well, wasn't there? Like, you went into Poland, like eastern Poland, so it was still German up to... Well, it was German up to the start of the Second World War.
Yeah, but Hitler wanted it all. He wanted the Soviet Union, everything he wanted.
Well, that's also, the whole Aryan superiority thing as well, isn't it? That's what these guys had.
He wanted to build a Third Reich, didn't he?
Yeah, well, this was the
for 1,000 years.
This is the Empire of the Rising Sun.
Yeah, very similar. That's why they allied, I suppose, in the war.
Yeah. Now, bear in mind, in the First World War, Japan had fought on the side of the Allies against Germany. They'd attacked German colonies in the east, which they took, and then the Britain and France and the victorious powers said, "We'll have them, thanks, cheers." Mm-hmm. A little bit more resentment from the Japanese. Oh, you can have this empire, why can't we? We're just as good as you. Vivisection, for example, is the practice of mutilating human bodies without anaesthesia to study the operations of living systems. Thousands of men and women, mainly Chinese communist prisoners, as well as children and elderly farmers, were infected with diseases such as cholera and the plague, and then had their organs removed for examination before they died, in order to study the effects of the disease without the decomposition that occurs after death. Mental. Claire's just shaking her head at me. Mike has a smile on his face. Think of the scientific data.
It was very valuable.
Well, we'll find that out at the end.
Sadly.
Subjects had limbs amputated and reattached to the other side of the body, while others had their limbs crushed off, frozen.
It's Mr. McGregor.
Mr. McGrew with an arm
Mr. McGregor with a leg for an arm for a leg.
That's it! That's it! Hi, everybody! Others had their limbs crushed or frozen or had the circulation cut off to observe the progress of gangrene. Again, a valuable military experiment, that one, isn't it? They got gangrene, shit. How do we treat this better? What's the times? What's the treatment times? But there's a limit though, isn't there? But they're never going to get a better opportunity than this. Same as Mengele had in Auschwitz. They'll never get a better opportunity. The laws are going out the window.
Doesn't mean you should do it.
No, but just sociopaths always rise to the top in that sort of environment, don't they? I mean, there was soldiers there who didn't like what was going on, but they're soldiers, aren't they? And they've got to follow orders, or they end up on the same fucking treatment table.
Yeah.
That's the sad reality of it. And until you
follow an order, you get shot, don't you?
Yeah.
Or end up on the table getting vivisected. Or get thrown in the prisoners who are probably going to kill you because you're a soldier who's observed or participated in beatings, rapes, etc., etc.
Yeah. Not going to take kindly to you, are they?
They're not going to be thrilled about you joining them and taking up an extra space in their already cramped confines, I'd imagine. Yeah, they're going to be thrilled about that. And finally, when a prisoner's body was all used up, they would be typically shot or killed by lethal injection, although some may have been buried alive.
Oh my god, you've just been cut open while you're awake, and they bury you alive just to top it off.
Yeah, but at least give me the lethal fucking injection. Just as it depends how arse they can be that day, doesn't it?
First of all, they deglove you, got your skeleton arms,
Yeah,
and they cut you open.
You're flapping your skeleton hands around, and they put you on the table, and then go, oh, let's see what that gangrene, let's see what that frostbite did to your internal organs, and start slicing you open.
And when they're done,
They'd bury you alive if you survive that. Unless that'd be fucking tough to survive. They'd die of shock at some point. You'd have cardiac arrest.
Some might not have though. Some might have survived.
That is true. None of the Chinese, Mongolian, Korean or Russian prisoners and Western prisoners assigned to Unit 731 survived their confinement.
None of them.
No.
Yeah.
And these are prisoners of war. Nowadays, you've got the Geneva Convention. Mm-hmm. If someone surrenders, you got to treat them well.
You had that back then too.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I don't think the Japanese were signatories to it though. I think they pulled out of it.
I'll explain it then, won't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the usual process was, okay, they've surrendered, you have to feed them and treat them well.
Yeah, treat them medicinally, feed them, treat them humanely. I mean, not too well, but...
Well enough.
Depends what rank you are.
Well, that's true, yeah.
Unless you're in a Japanese prisoner war camp, like Bridge over the River Kwai, we've all seen that. Got the officers basically working for the Japanese, haven't you? I mean, to try and keep their men alive, but still...
In World War II, you want to get captured with the Germans, like the Japanese. Think of Escape to Victory.
Yeah.
You get to play football.
Well, that's it. I mean, yes, it was a prisoner of war camp, and it was a prison camp. It wasn't a holiday camp, but still, yes, you were allowed certain liberties. You could get
and
cigarettes.
The officers were treated well.
The officers were treated better.
And when they tried to escape, they'd bring them back and just give them a little ticking off, wouldn't they?
Unless they did it really, 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 really often. Yeah. Douglas Bader got out of Colditz on 2 fucking false legs.
Fair play.
I think he escaped a few times from various camps on wooden legs. Can't knock that. Yeah. You're escaping things.
Wooden legs?
Yeah, Douglas Bader had no legs. He was a World War II fighter pilot.
He escaped?
Yeah.
Fuck, how did he do that?
Well, they obviously left him his legs because he was an officer. You know, they can't expect him just to be wheeled about. He's an officer. And in the end, they did have to take his legs off him.
I was going to say, surely in the end, you're just going to be like, mate, you're running too far with these legs.
I'm just imagining the guy out of Family Guy, the pirate. The 2 woodens.
Seamus.
Yeah.
With the wooden legs and wooden arms.
It wasn't quite like that.
No. They were
Prosthetic limbs.
They were prosthetic limbs, but they were wooden at the time.
Yeah.
Interesting fact, that's why they reckoned he could pull tighter turns in his hurricane. Because he had no legs, the blood didn't rush down as far. Interesting fact. Let's move on to the next.
Cut the legs off pilots then.
He's got suits that compress the body now, Mike. You don't just cut the leg.
Okay.
Don't need to start taking legs. Welcome to the Royal Air Force, son.
The Japanese would have.
They might have. Save on weight.
Yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure you needed your feet to do stuff in fighter planes at one point. No, you didn't. No. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe to release the bombs. I've no idea. Don't have to fly a World
You
War
want to
II
be a
fighter.
pilot, son? Chop your legs off. Won't be needing them. What about after the war? You won't be needing them.
Who says you're going to survive?
We've got a plan at the end.
Obviously, another experiment was the effectiveness of various weapons, and that was of obvious interest to the Japanese army. To determine effectiveness, Unit 731 herded prisoners together on a firing range and blasted them from various ranges by multiple Japanese weapons, such as the 8mm pistols, bolt-action rifles, machine guns, and grenades. And obviously, they were mortared and artillery shell tied to crucifixes, and let's see what the shrapnel does at this range. Oh, the shrapnel's falling at this one. He's lost a leg. He's 30 metres out. Oh, he's only 20 metres out. He's lost his genitals and most of his thighs.
You want to know how effective your weapons are, don't you, against the enemy?
I think a lot of this data had already been collected. Crikey.
Well, not
really.
Not in that detail, no.
Only some battlefield reports.
Yeah.
And they're unreliable, aren't they? Who can say who died or what? I mean, obviously, if they clear someone's been shot.
You know your own, but the enemy, I mean, if you win the battle, you might find they're dead, but you won't find they're wounded. Would have been taken away, wouldn't they?
Maybe taken away.
Yeah.
Unlucky if you are wounded and still there and the Japanese get you.
Yeah.
And wound patterns and penetration depths were then compared on the bodies of the dead and dying inmates. Bayonets, swords and knives were also studied in this way, although the prisoners were usually bound for these tests. Flamethrowers were also tested on both covered and exposed skin. In addition, gas chambers were set up at unit facilities and test subjects exposed to nerve gas and blister agents. Yeah.
At what point do you go,
You don't want that.
Come on, boss, not this.
You can't say anything, can you? You're in the army, you can't say, boss, don't do this.
You can't say, boss, don't do this, because they'll go, oh, losing your stomach for it, are you? You're not in this for the noble land of Japan and its fucking empire of the sun, right? Off you go.
Front line.
Front line or into the fucking gas chamber.
You got a cushy job here. You're safe, you're not fighting the enemy.
No.
You just
You're
got
probably
your
on
prisoners.
decent food.
Yeah. You get sent to the front line when they're fighting Americans.
All the Chinese communists
Yeah.
who are American backed at this point, as we go deeper into the war, and the Brits, and the Australians, and your Navy's getting its arse handed to it.
So the incentive is not to step out of line and just follow orders, isn't it?
Yeah, you might even survive this war.
Yeah.
That's all everyone wants, isn't it? To survive,
Yeah.
to go home at the end of it. Heavy objects were dropped onto bound prisoners to study crush injuries. Subjects were locked up and deprived of food and water to learn how long humans could survive without them, and victims were allowed to drink only seawater or were given injections of mismatched human or animal blood to study transfusions and the clotting process. Oh, can we use animal blood instead of human blood? Let's have a go. I'd help if we had to give transfusions, if we could start killing cows instead of getting people to donate blood.
I suppose someone had to think about it, didn't they?
Yeah, but this is shit that they tried to do in the Middle Ages, like transfer fucking different blood transfusion. We've been pissed about with since the Renaissance. You know, people already knew you couldn't give animal blood to humans. They already figured that out through trial and error. Meanwhile, prolonged X-ray exposure sterilised and killed thousands of research participants as well as inflicting horrible burns when emitting plates were miscalibrated or held too close to the subject's nipples, genitals or faces. So it's like, how close should we put it? Fuck it, put it right against it, who cares, only a log. What can you say?
Fucked up, innit?
Yeah. To study the effects of high G-forces on pilots and falling paratroopers, Unit 731 personnel loaded human beings into large centrifuges and spun them at higher and higher speeds until they lost consciousness and or died, which usually happened around 10 to 15 Gs, although young children showed a lower tolerance for acceleration forces, presumably. And they're a bit more jelly-like kids, aren't they?
I suppose, yeah.
Lower tolerance.
Lower tolerance for acceleration forces, so the kids aren't as robust as adults, are they? The faster you fire a kid, it's more faster it dies.
Well, if you're in a centrifuge, all the blood's going to be pulled towards the outer, and depending on what position you're in, taking the blood from anywhere, you know, in the brain for any period of time is going to knock you unconscious or kill you, innit?
I guess it's the more blood you've got, because you're a taller, you've got more blood in you. Does that kids have less blood than adults, or do you all have 8 pints?
Of course they have less blood.
They have less blood, yeah.
Smaller, aren't they, you fool?
I don't know. No idea.
It's on a weight ratio, isn't it?
Is it?
I think
It's 8 to 10 pints. So no one's got more than 10, unless they're ridiculously tall, surely. I don't know, let's say 8 to 10. Kids have less, so they've got less to keep in the brain. It drains faster, I guess.
Yeah.
Would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah. General Shiro Ishii was the commander of Unit 731, and he also thought of it, hey, let's do some experiments with syphilis. Because, you know, them soldiers, while they're out raping or visiting prostitutions...
Yeah, it's been the bane of military since ancient Egypt.
Oh, fuck, it's the world's oldest profession with the world's second oldest profession. They go together. You know, soldier, prostitute, 1 and 2. Yeah, they go together like wine and cheese, like beer and Pringles, like meat on pizza. They always hang around, and that's the reason. They always, when you get given antibiotics, they say, no, don't go drinking any alcohol. Utter bollocks.
Yep. So they need to stop the soldiers getting pissed and then sleeping with prostitutes.
Basically, say you get wounded in the Second World War.
Yeah.
You go home, you get patched up, they put you on antibiotics, penicillin, make sure you can't get gangrene. You're going to recover fully, you're going to go back to the front. But they give you a bit of leave in London. So what do you want to do when you're on leave? Because you've just been fighting a war, you've been wounded, you've been in hospital for ages. You're going to get drunk. What happens when you get drunk? You meet women. You start talking to women. You start talking to baby prostitutes, and there's plenty of them in wartime London. And before you know it, you've got syphilis. Because everyone's banging everybody at this point. Maybe you find a nice young man, who knows? Maybe you find a fucking non-binary identifier in World War II London, and you're a non-binary identifier, even though you just... I don't know how it all works, but either way,
if half your soldiers have got syphilis, they can't...
You find somebody who's got syphilis,
can they?
And then you're in the hospital for longer, and the job is to get you back to the front as fast as possible.
Yeah. So they used to say, don't drink.
Don't drink.
On this medication. It wasn't because the alcohol did something to the medication in your body, it was just to stop them from getting pissed and shagging prostitutes. And...
Yeah. So to learn what they needed to know, doctors assigned to Unit 731 infected prisoners with the disease and withheld treatment to observe the uninterrupted course of the illness. A contemporary treatment, a primitive chemotherapy called salvarsan, was sometimes administered over a period of months to observe the side effects. However, to ensure effective transmission of the disease, syphilitic male prisoners were ordered to rape both female and male fellow prisoners, who would then be monitored to observe the onset of the disease if the first exposure failed to establish infection. More rapes would be arranged until it did. Didn't get it on the first go, in you go again.
Fuck.
That's terrible.
Right, what's next? Oh, here's a cheerful one. Rape and forced pregnancy. Beyond just the syphilis experiments, rape became a common feature of Unit 731's experiments. For example, female prisoners of childbearing age were sometimes forcibly impregnated so that weapon and trauma experiments could be done on them.
Whilst pregnant, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, want to find out what happens to mother and baby.
After being infected with various diseases, exposed to chemical weapons, or suffering crush injuries, bullet wounds and shrapnel injuries, the pregnant subjects are opened up and the effects on the fetuses studied. The idea seems to have been to translate the team's findings into civilian medicine, but if Unit 731's researchers ever published these results, the papers seem not to have survived the war years. A civilian point of view would be, okay, we're getting bombed, we're getting air raided. If we've got a pregnant woman, can we save the baby if we lose the mother? Because obviously you need another body for the war, even if it's going to be in 16 or 12 or 8 years' time. It's another body. The mother's going to die, can we save the baby?
Yeah.
But still, not justifying it.
No.
It's still fucking terrible. It's fucking atrocious. You're raping people to then blow them up.
Yeah, it's beyond fucked, isn't it?
Germ warfare. Last one. The totality of Unit 731's research was in support of their larger mission, which by 1939 was to develop horrific weapons of mass destruction for use against the Chinese population and presumably American and Soviet forces if the time ever came. To this end, Unit 731 cycled through tens of thousands of prisoners at several research facilities across Manchuria, which had been occupied by the Imperial forces for years. Inmates of these facilities were infected with several of the most lethal pathogens known to science, such as Yersinia pestis, which causes bubonic and pneumonic plague, and typhus, which the Japanese hoped would spread from person to person after being deployed and depopulate disputed areas.
Now, you want to attack a country, first of all you want to infiltrate it, bring it to its knees so it's weak as it most possibly can, so it's the easiest to take over.
Yeah, spread a pathogen.
Yeah. If half the population have got the fucking plague, they're not fighting you, are they?
You mean like COVID?
COVID's a bit different from the plague, isn't it?
It is, but it's enough to put you on your arse if you released it.
No, because 85% of people don't even have symptoms, do they?
Oh yeah, but maybe this is the research version. Who's to say there isn't a more deadly version being bred in another lab?
We know that they are. They're doing gain of function, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
In that lab, in Wuhan lab.
Maybe this is a low-key way to kill off the vulnerable amongst society.
Well, it seems to be killing off the vulnerable and those with underlying health conditions, doesn't it? That's what they're saying. Still, I think that's what they're peddling. And anybody who hasn't had the vaccine.
Don't forget that.
Yeah, but do they want to kill them off? Old people are a source of revenue if you're a pharmaceutical company. You want to keep them alive as long as possible, but still sick.
Nah, because we've now got a fucking COVID booster every 6 months. Just up the price on that. It's going to be necessary.
Well, swings and roundabouts, isn't it?
And how many variants are there going to be? And every variant, the price gets a little bit more.
Yeah, but if you're killing off people that are your customers...
There's always going to be elderly and weak and other people, though, isn't there? Everyone's going to get old.
Not in your theory, they're trying to kill them off.
Yeah, but this is a never-ending cycle.
But that's their money stream, isn't it?
Oh, well yeah, Mike, we're being fed with cancers anyway. They're going to get the money off us for other things.
Eventually.
This is going to get sooner.
Eventually, but... you don't kill off your customer base, do you?
No, but then again, they'll always get their money back another way. There's other revenue streams in there, putting up fingers in other pies. Cover that world war that's coming.
War with China.
China, the Middle East, Russia maybe, North Korea maybe. North Korea and China and Russia together, who knows?
And Syria and Iran and...
Yeah, that could be fun.
I can't see another world war happening.
Can't you?
No.
It will when the resources start to run out and we all start scrapping over who what gets what. That's when it'll happen. Just all wars have ever been fought over is resources. Whether it be land or money or natural resources, that's pretty much everything, isn't it?
Yep.
And when the ore starts running out...
And of course the capitalist model, we need to keep producing in order to keep the economies going. Need more and more resources.
Oil-based, yeah.
Doesn't China build something like fucking... like a dozen fucking coal-fired power stations a day or something daft like that, or it was at one point. So we've got to mine all that, so we've got to build it.
But then again, we went through it, didn't we?
Yeah.
The Industrial Revolution, so it's kind of difficult to say, well, don't follow our path and become wealthy. They're not going to do it, are they?
Yeah, but you got to look at the scale of what's being done
I know,
now,
it's
isn't it? And the fact that we've already fucked the planet up a bit, so we've got to, you can't fuck up a bit more.
I know. So
But then who's denying their right to go through it?
That's why we've got to come up with a different economic system around the world, isn't it?
Bring on that Star Trek future.
Capitalism's killing us, isn't it?
It is. It is killing us. You've got to
killing the
make it
planet.
more friendly.
But you can't, because that's the whole point of capitalism.
Yeah, Star Trek's a capitalist society.
No, it's not.
They're still buying Picard's wine.
Well, I don't know about the later sequels, but...
He's got a vineyard, he sells
Originally,
wine, he lives in a chateau,
isn't-
he's rich, man.
Well, yeah, that's later on, isn't it?
Yeah.
They've obviously changed it somewhere along the line, but it used to be like a communist thing, didn't it?
Luxury communist.
Are you talking like Picard?
Mm.
Yeah, he'd come out of Star Trek then. He was just dipping back in, wasn't he?
He's still in the universe.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is that it's not the same writer, is it? He's dead, isn't he?
Yeah, Gene Roddenberry. I'm not sure if Gene Roddenberry's son had something to do with it. Still, Lower Decks is fun.
Yeah, he said, yeah.
To breed the most lethal strains possible, doctors monitored patients for rapid onset of symptoms and quick progression. Prisoners who pulled through were shot, but those who got sickest fastest were bled to death on a mortuary table, and their blood was used to transfect other prisoners, the sickest of whom would themselves be bled to transfer the most virulent strain to another generation.
So beyond belief, isn't it?
It's nuts. It's just as industrial as the Holocaust. Except this is one facility rather than a nation, an empire-spanning effort. One main facility and several other satellite facilities, but still nothing on the scale of the Holocaust to the size of it.
No.
One member of Unit 731 later recalled that very sick and unresisting prisoners would be laid out on a slab so a line could be inserted into their carotid artery. Where's a carotid? Carotid artery. Oh, it's the neck.
It's in the neck, yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't even read that my first day. Carotid. And when most of the blood had been siphoned off and the heart was too weak to pump anymore, an officer in leather boots climbed onto the table and jumped onto the victim's chest with enough force to crush the rib cage, whereupon another dollop of blood would spurt into the container.
Fucking hell. Every last drop.
That's hardcore, isn't it? That's fucking crazy. It's just mental. Claire's just looking at me in shock again. Just all you've done is you just have this look of shock upon your face.
Well, it's just beyond belief,
Yeah,
isn't
it's
it?
horrific
You know?
to think human beings are capable of this stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
Jumping up on the rib cage, I mean, come on.
Just to get that last drop of blood out.
It's nuts. So when the plague bacillus had been bred to what was felt to be a sufficiently lethal calibre, the last generation of prisoners to be infected were exposed to a large number of fleas. Eumenius pestis, preferred vector of contagion, that's how the Black Death spread.
Mm-hmm.
The fleas were then packed in dust and sealed inside clay bomb casings. On October 4th, 1940, Japanese bombers deployed these casings, each loaded with over 30,000 fleas that had sucked blood from a dying prisoner over the Chinese village of Kuzhou. Witnesses to the raid recall a fine reddish dust settling on surfaces all over town, followed by a rash of painful flea bites that afflicted nearly everyone. This is like medieval shit, isn't it? This is the equivalent of flinging your dead bodies over the wall.
Oh, that's nasty.
So from contemporary accounts, it is known that more than 2,000 civilians died of plague following this attack, and that another 1,000 or so died in nearby WWII after the plague was carried there by sick railway workers. Other attacks, using anthrax, killed approximately 6,000 more people in the area. Now, in August 1945, after Hiroshima and Nagasaki had both been bombed, the Soviet army had invaded Manchuria and utterly annihilated the Japanese army. The Emperor read his infamous, however you want to look at that, surrender declaration over the radio, and Unit 731 was officially disbanded. Its records were mostly burnt, destroying any useful information the team had managed to generate in 13 years of research. Researchers mostly slipped back into civilian life in occupied Japan as if nothing had ever happened, and many of them becoming prominent members of university faculty.
Really?
Yeah, so no justice.
Nope, because as we'll find out shortly, this was a cover-up at the end of the war. To this day, Japan has not apologised for, and China has not forgiven, the countless atrocities Japanese forces visited upon China between 1931 and 1945. And as the last witnesses to this history grow old and die, it's very possible the matter will never be addressed again. I mean, that is what they did. I mean, my God, it was horrific. I mean, I only remember me nan telling as a bloke in our hometown, Dawley, well, mine and Mike's, Claire, you have a different bit of Telford, but it was captured by the Japanese, and he'd had bamboo shards jammed up his fingernails, and you know, he was never the same guy ever again. I mean, he never married. He was a quiet bloke. That was it. That was it. He ran the cake shop and just baked the cakes. That was it.
Yep. And just think, he was one of the lucky ones.
Oh.
Yeah, he got out alive.
Yeah. He wasn't cut open alive.
That's it, innit? It's crazy. And you know, a lot of Western prisoners, I mean, British, Australian, they were worked to death as well, but nothing like on a scale like this. I mean, it was slave labour. This is just sadism. Is this one of the worst atrocities in human history, do you think? I think it's up there, isn't it? I think the Holocaust gets it for the scale, isn't it? I mean, you're talking 6 million people. I mean, the thing is with Unit 731 is I've never read a death toll. I think you said a few thousand, didn't it? A few thousand in some experiments, but... So I don't think the numbers were there. The numbers aren't there. It's on a lower scale, but the sadism... Yeah. I mean, the Holocaust is number one. This has got to be in the top... Well, I don't know. I wouldn't like to say. I mean, there's been genocides throughout history, but on a... Sadly. On a sadistic scale, this is up there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's barbarism. It's racism. It is racism because obviously they have a superiority over these people. They're referring to them as logs. So anyone that wants to come at me for that, are you crying racism? No, it's not. This is part of a nationalistic agenda.
It's
eugenics, isn't it?
Yeah, it's any other race that's up there, isn't it?
You know, and it's well documented. The Japanese government was like, all right, once we've taken China, we're going to sterilise them. We're going to euthanize them. What are we going to do? We're going to subjugate them. How do we do it? But the euthanization and sterilisation was on the table. You know, I learned that from Dan Carlin. And you want to dispute my sources, listeners? Mm-hmm. Hardcore History. Have a check out of their Pacific War 6-parter. It's very good. Kept me entertained this last week, as well as others. So let's go to the cover-up. After General Douglas MacArthur accepted the official surrender of Japan on September 2nd, 1945, work began on the compilation of evidence of Japanese war crimes. No shit. For everything, fuck me. Eventuating in the establishment of the International Military Tribunal for the Far East. So, as Japan's irreparably tarnished image, there was seemingly unending accounts of Japanese atrocities committed across mainland Asia and the Pacific Islands. Rape, torture, and the astonishingly creative cruelty grew to characterise the Imperial Japanese military. and it could be reasonably expected that Allied forces would have upheld the charter of the War Crimes Tribunal, prosecuting Japanese war criminals to the fullest extent available, as it should be. Unfortunately, some of the worst Japanese crimes against humanity were deliberately omitted from human rights tribunals. The chemical and biological experiments on Chinese and Allied POWs by Imperial Army Unit 731. Now, obviously it was established by the Emperor, because everything would be. He'd have to give some kind of nod. Mm-hmm. Their exact mission varied over the course of its operations. Two focuses remain constant. One, research and develop the creation of biological chemical agents, and two, research the effects of extraordinary conditions on the human body with the aim of bettering the treatment of Japanese soldiers in combat. In 1945, the United States' explicit strategic reason to pardon members of Unit 731 was a threat posed by the USSR. Unit 731's experiments, horrific as they were, provided enormous amounts of useful medical knowledge and data to the United States Army regarding biological and chemical warfare and, of course, medical treatments. Mm-hmm. After gathering the unit's data, General Douglas MacArthur decided that information learned by members of Unit 731 had the potential to be of major strategic importance in a future war against the Soviet Union, and that meant the secrecy of the unit would become a strategic priority, and that all information gathered on the unit would be strictly confidential, precluding Unit 731's inclusion in the Tokyo War Crimes trial.
Unbelievable, innit?
Yeah.
They're like, that
was horrific.
That data's more important than
the lives of the people.
Yeah. Getting justice for the lives of the people, so...
Because we need that, because we might be going to war with the Russians soon, so you know what, well, they've got all that data, be ashamed to waste it.
I thought a lot of it was burnt.
Still got the people.
Yeah. Knowledge of the people, isn't it? It's like Project Paperclip.
And I'd imagine that a lot of it might have been burnt, the stuff has been sent off, remember, copies have always been sent off to head office. This is what we're doing. This is the data we're getting. It's going to mainland Japan.
Well, it's going on for 13 years, did it say?
Yeah.
So they're going to be reporting to somebody, aren't they?
Of course. And of course, if you get the doctors that perform the experiments, and they can tell you the data, can't they?
Exactly, first hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, the US Army's response to a public inquiry regarding Japanese experimentation on human subjects was a mix of feigned ignorance, outright deception, and intentional suppression. When prodded by American journalists, US Army leadership repeatedly claimed to have found no evidence of Japanese experimentation on human test subjects. Over time, this continual refusal to acknowledge the crimes of Unit 731 began to create issues between the United States and allied nations in the Pacific, namely the USSR. Soviet troops had captured multiple research facilities used by 731 in Manchuria and concluded that the Imperial Japanese Army had been performing biological experiments on allied powers. After Soviet intelligence gathered the necessary evidence, they established a human rights tribunal in the eastern Russian city of Khabarovsk. I'm going to go with that. The trial at Khabarovsk, in keeping with the Stalinist traditions of the time, was less a trial and more of a 10-day retelling and condemnation of the Japanese human experiments in Manchuria. However, the Khabarovsk trial deserves recognition as the only public forum at the time which discussed and released information regarding the atrocities committed by Unit 731.
We wouldn't know about it now if it wasn't for that, I guess, then. Mm-hmm. Because the Yanks would have covered it up.
And ironically puts the Russians and the Stalinist Soviet Union as the moral party in this.
Well, why would the Yanks want to cover it up then?
Because they wanted the information.
Right.
They're occupying Japan now. Where are the doctors and all that gone? Back to Japan.
Yeah.
It's all theirs now. The Russians...
It's like Project Paperclip, and they got all the Nazi scientists.
Werner von Braun took them to the moon.
Yeah.
Was still a member of the SS and developed the V2 rockets which bombed London. It's crazy.
Yeah.
What they're willing to forgive for knowledge.
Knowledge is power, isn't it?
Of course, I mean, the Japanese weren't excessively technologically advanced during World War II, not as much as the Germans, although they did have rocket-powered suicide rockets suicide bombs by the end of the war.
Had what?
Rocket-powered suicide bombs, like V1 rockets, were piloted by people.
Oh, right.
But they were, I think, like only a handful.
I was going to say,
I never looked into that. I know they had them. I don't know if they ever used them or got them to the stage. Well, they definitely didn't get them to the stage of mass production. But the Germans did give them like a V1 and said, there you go, there's technology sharing. They had suicide torpedoes.
Did they?
Yeah, you'd get in, you'd be put into the torpedo tube of a submarine, and you would be fired off. And of course, because the technology at the time and Japan's ability to produce lots of really good stuff on a massive basis was limited by the weak. You know, your propellant might run out, so your main source of ignition might go, or you might just pop out and sink to the bottom, who knows? And of course, then you're just stuck there.
It's not a job you want, is
Not a
it?
job, but you volunteered for that. It's kamikaze mission. Wasn't just the planes. We'll do an episode on kamikazes one day, I think. I've got quite into Japanese culture recently.
I think there's more to it than that.
Yeah, no. I've been reading a lot. I've been listening to that Dan Carlin thing, and I've been and there's a few other podcasts I listened to that got me into
The military culture.
the military culture of Japan in the Second World War.
Sounds pretty brutal.
It's very brutal. But yeah, so basically it was a cover-up. There you go. On that, I think our dark Christmas episode has ended. I think it's our darkest.
Yeah, it's well dark, innit? Well dark. And that film about it is horrific as well.
Yeah, it's Men Behind the Sun. It is on YouTube, I think. Certainly the highlights are.
Yeah, the film's on there, yeah.
This is like in my own. I mean, obviously someone will go, oh well, there was this genocide of such and such and this year, and yeah, okay, that was probably worse, but this is definitely up there with the Holocaust, isn't it? Just the sheer barbarity and sadism.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's procedural, isn't it?
It's very measured, very calm, and
there's a scientific approach to it.
It's all thought out. It's premeditated.
That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, it's not sort of like spur of the moment in the heat of battle, some kind of massacre. It's over a sustained period of time, using these people just to conduct the most horrific experiments on them.
The disease one gets really...
Yeah, that disease one.
It's just unimaginable, isn't it?
Oh god, yeah, I mean, all of it's fucking horrific. With the disease one, where they're like, oh, you're really sick, I'm going to drain you of blood and put it into, I don't know, the guy you've fucking been mates with for the last couple of years while you've been in here, being brutally treated. Or not a couple of years even, probably a matter of weeks, with the one person you managed to strike some kind of thing up with, and we're going to just inject him with your plague-ridden blood, and then some cunt's going to jump on your chest to get a bit more out. I mean, what the fuck?
Here it is, Merry Christmas.
Hey.
Everybody's having fun.
I was wondering if you were going to do it.
Waiting for the right moment.
Did you pick that? You've been saving that moment. I thought I was going to see something whirring behind your eyes. You've been waiting for that moment. And that is Dark Christmas. So I'll be Ben, wishing you a very Merry Christmas after listening to that. Thank you for listening. Follow us on Facebook, Cutting for the Boy and the PTA.
No.
Cutting the Boy and the Post with Apocalypse.
Yep.
SoundCloud, Cutting for the Boy and the PTA. We're on Anchor, Spotify, anywhere you can get a podcast, really. We're on there somewhere. Find us. YouTube at Apocalypse Bull.
Yes.
YouTube's the one consistent in all of this. I wish we could be called Apocalypse Bull. I wish you'd have chosen that. In a way.
Well, we're stuck with it now.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Well, it's a unique title, isn't it?
Yeah.
No other fucker's got this title out there.
No.
Very true, although it is, like my dick, a mouthful. And on that note, I will say thank you for listening. I've been Ben. Don't drink the favourite. Don't join a cult.
I've been Mike. Thanks for listening. Peace out. May the force be with you.
And I've been Claire. Keep an open mind. Not so open with it dribbles out your ears, guys.